On June 15, 1865, General Order No. 3 was read to the inhabitants of Galveston, Texas, to enforce the Emancipation Proclamation of January 1, 1863, and it was issued by General Gordon Granger. But before we read what was read, let's set the stage. In 1787, the framers of the Republic went to Philadelphia to make amendments to the Articles of Confederation, which had served its purpose but fell short in some very critical areas. They drew the shades, locked the doors, and instead of making amendments to the current document, they overthrew the government by coming up with a completely different document. We know that document today as the United States Constitution. They needed the majority of the states to ratify it, but accomplishing that goal was not going to be easy. There was a big elephant in the middle of the room. Now, if you talk too much about getting rid of this elephant, the southern states would not ratify. And if you talk too much about keeping the elephant, the northern states would not ratify. What was the elephant in the room? The peculiar institution of slavery. There were three compromises in the Constitution. First, they would not discuss the importation of human beings for the next 20 years, which would have been until 1808. Second, for every individual who was not considered free, that individual would be counted as 3/5 towards tax assessment and, more importantly, representation in Congress. And third, if you owed a debt, crossing the state line would not absolve you of that debt. The Constitution was finished on September 17, 1787. That elephant in the room issue would be discussed at a later date. On September 17, 1862, exactly 75 years to the date, they picked up that discussion again at a place called Antietam. This time, over 125,000 individuals joined in the conversation. 14% casualties for the Union, 27% casualties for the Confederacy. That was one heck of a conversation. 5 days later, Mr. Lincoln introduced his preliminary Emancipation Proclamation. He told the Confederacy that they had 100 days to come back to the Union. If they did, it would be just like it was before. But if they didn't, those individuals who they claimed ownership over would be henceforth and forever free. On January 1st, 1863, Mr. Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation went into effect. But who did it free? The Emancipation Proclamation did not free a single individual. If you were enslaved in the border states, which consisted of Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, Missouri, and by 1863 West Virginia, or anywhere where the Union was already in control, New Orleans, certain parts of the Hampton Roads area, January 1st, you would still be enslaved. This Emancipation Proclamation only affected individuals in states that were in rebellion to the Union. So had the Confederacy come back to the Union by 11:59 p.m. December 31st, 1862, they would have maintained their peculiar institution of slavery. And this Emancipation Proclamation, as critical as we see it today, at that point in time, it was merely a worthless and unenforceable document short of a Union victory on the battlefield. So if the Union did not win the war, that document would have gone down in history as meaning absolutely nothing. But there was one small clause in Mr. Lincoln's January 1st version that simply stated, any man of African descent who wants to fight for the Union Army or the Union Navy will be allowed to do so. Over 209,000 men of color, 38,000 plus died in the process, said, you know what, we'll put our bodies on the line for this unenforceable document. And they were willing to defend this country when this country was not so willing to defend them. When black folks were in watch night service on December 31st, 1862, they were not there to see whether or not they would be free. They were there to see whether or not they would have the opportunity to fight to be free. The 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery, sort of, was passed by the Senate in April 1864, and then passed by the House in January of 1865. However, it would not be ratified until December of 1865, 8 months after Mr. Lincoln's assassination. So on June 19, 1865, this was read to the people of Galveston, Texas. The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and free laborer. The freedmen are advised to remain at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness, either there or elsewhere. General Order Number 3, issued by General Gordon Granger. Unfortunately, it would not be quite that simple. It was a step in the right direction, but it was just another small step on the long road towards civil rights. This is John W. McCaskill, History Alive. Check out our website at www.jwmhistoryalive.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And if you want more films, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel at John W. McCaskill. This is John W. McCaskill, History Alive.